Welcome aboard! We will be your guides during this magical journey into the movies. It's the perfect job for us because we love the movies. It's showtime! Ready when you are, CB!
Action!
Welcome to Monoreel Radio, episode number 274. I'm Sean.
And I'm Jackie.
And we have a very exciting week coming up this week. House of Mouse Expo at the Osceola Heritage Center is going to be this week. More on that later. But we are very excited because we have our dear friend Sosh joining us on Monoreel Radio this week. Sosh, how are you doing?
Good morning, my favorite people ever. I'm fantastic. Bright-eyed and bushy.
Yeah, I hope we don't ruin that. So all right, so it's funny because for those who have been with us for a while, you know that I am a fan of doing What the February. Doing a full month of WTF movies. Movies that you see the tiles on Disney Plus, you wonder, WTF. Or movies that you've only heard of through Disney lore, and you say, WTF. You don't share the same enthusiasm for What the February that I do.
Not after last year when it was just like the air getting sucked out of a room. You know, January, we do all of the more recent films that had big theatrical releases, and it's a great month, and it's exciting to talk about new stuff. And then the balloon just pops with What the February, because 9 times out of 10, the films have been horrible. We have found a couple of gems by exploring these lesser known titles like Apple Dumpling Gang, like Cat from Outer Space, but we've just been hitting dud after dud after dud. So I was not looking forward to doing a whole month of What the February, but I allowed you 1 week of it. And we maybe hit the mother load. So Sosh, I want to publicly apologize to you for having this be your episode. Because for our listeners who don't know, we've known Sosh for a really long time. We've been going to his restaurant, The Whale's Tail, which is located in Northport on Long Island. So if you're around, go pay him a visit at Whale's Tail. They have the best tacos on the planet. I've eaten a lot of tacos, so I can attest to that. And Sosh recently launched his own podcast called Behind the Blowhole. And he's had a lot of success with it. We were guests on his podcast, and we wanted to reciprocate and have him back on ours. And he probably wouldn't have come knowing what this movie was and what we were going to throw at him. But thank you for being here. So for our listeners, I want to get into a little bit about your Disney fandom, because you are a DVC member. And, you know, you're not the dad who begrudgingly comes here and is just here to fund the trip. Like, you really seem to enjoy your time at the parks. And I think that that's because you're obviously you're a very successful restaurateur. You know a thing or two about hospitality. And I think that that's where your love of Disney comes from. So I want to talk a little bit about that. And then taking it one step further, I also want to know, what's your history with Disney movies? Like, do you have a favorite? Is that something that, you came to later in life when you had kids? Because I realized, for as much as we've talked about Disney and as much as we've bonded over that, I don't even know really your history about movies.
All right. Well, thank you for inviting me. And thank you for allowing me to watch that piece of train wreck of garbage of a movie last night, which I can't wait to talk about. I'm just kidding. It was quite enlightening. But I only went to Disney once when I was a kid. We just didn't have the means to go. So I went when I was like 12 with my mother. And we stayed off premise, and it wasn't a great experience. My wife, her grandparents, so they would go down like every year. So she was like obsessed with Disney. And she dragged me down there. That was like her big thing. We got to go. And I went down there when my oldest was like 2, and she was pregnant with my second. And it was horrific. I was like, this is awful. Why am I doing this? I was in a different state of mind, and I got to tell you, pushing around a pregnant lady with a 2-year-old is not great. And we would go back every single year. And finally, as the kids got like a little bit older, I drank the Kool-Aid. I said, why am I fighting this? Just go with it and be cheesy and live it up. And so finally, one year we were down there, and I surprised them by buying into DVC, and now I like it far more than they do. I love it because you know what? You just go down there and you just like stop fighting it. Don't be one of those people that's miserable standing up. Like just get into it, man. Just let it all out. It's awesome. I have a ball now, and yes, the hospitality is hands down the best that there is. So I enjoy that aspect of it. But I just love being there with my family and just acting like a dope. You know, what's not to like?
Love it.
Yeah, always just go there and just be a big kid, right?
Yeah, I love it. And my favorite movie, so to answer that one, I mean, growing up, I definitely like some of the classics like the Snow White and things like that. But I am 100% the biggest fan of Frozen. And it's just because when my girls were kids, they 2 years, I'm talking 2 years, every single day of their lives, every day, they dressed up and acted out that movie as Elsa and Anna. And it was like the greatest age and just the greatest memories of my life. They would knock on the door and sing the songs nonstop every friggin' day. I just loved it. So that's just the greatest memory as a dad ever.
Aw, that's not what I was expecting because most parents are so over Frozen, but I love that you're still embracing it. Not what I was expecting at all. I was thinking maybe
I honestly, I miss it. It was just the best time. You know, they got along with one another. That movie, they were obsessed with that movie, and for a good reason. It was a great movie. Everybody loved it. So I was more excited for the second one than they were because there was a couple of years in between them, right?
Yeah.
And they grew out of it. So I was really pumped. I was a little let down, probably more so because they weren't so thrilled about it, and it wasn't as good as the first one, but still, it was cool.
Well, I'll tell you what, there are 2 more Frozens coming, and my Frozen, it's never just a phase. I love Frozen, so I will go see the next 2 with you, and I promise I will be just as enthused as a little girl will be.
I'm very excited.
And you can come down and you can stay
fantastic.
with us. You
when
can
are
come
they
down
coming out?
25, I think, is going to be Frozen 3, and I don't think that they've announced that they're going to do a 4, but we don't have a date yet.
But you can come down and you can hang with us, and you don't have to burn any of your DVC points to do it.
Oh, can I come without my family and hang with you?
Yeah, sure. Why not?
That's the only way we do Disney.
All right.
All right. So talking about one of Disney's greatest films, we're going to now talk about this might be the worst. I mean, I hate to spoil it, but there's just no way around it. This might be, I don't know if it's fair to say the worst film that they've ever made, but certainly the worst one that we've ever watched. Are we ready for this?
Yeah, and I don't know if it's the worst one that we've ever watched.
Ooh.
But we'll talk about that later. Is it the worst we've ever watched? What made this one so much of a miss? And does it feel like it's canon for other films? That, on top of many other things, is what we are here to discuss today.
This episode is sponsored by Fierce Fox Co., designers of handmade silkscreen shirts. Fierce Fox has a t-shirt, tank top, hoodie, or crew neck for every fandom. So whether it's the movies or theme parks, princesses or villains, the MCU or Star Wars, everyone will find something they love. The designs range from subtle quotes from our favorite films to iconic characters we can wear proudly in so many different styles, such as sketchbook and concert tees. Listeners of Monoreel Radio can get a 20% discount using the code Monoreel at checkout. Visit fiercefoxco.com to check out all of the collections.
We meet scientist Albert, duly a family man struggling to pay the bills. His wife Katie tries to help the budget by making homemade applesauce, but the results are disastrous. However, she packs it for his lunch anyway after he lies about enjoying it. When Albert arrives at work at the animal lab that he works in, the animals get their hands on his lunch, and a duck eats the applesauce. When Dr. Gottlieb becomes fed up with the duck's performance in the learning lab, after the duck literally and figuratively lays an egg, he throws the duck out of the lab. The duck wanders into the radiation lab and becomes irradiated before Albert takes her home to save her life, and his son Jimmy becomes attached and names the duck Charlie. After an altercation with their neighbor, Mr. Hooper, and his dog, the family see Charlie lay 4 eggs after hearing their dog bark. The dog next door, this is. When Albert goes to bury the eggs that night, he sees that the yolks inside are gold. He hires his friend Fred to help incorporate after learning scientifically that the duck can lay synthetic golden eggs. However, Katie gave the duck to a farmer named Mr. Purdom. They find Charlie, and Fred and Albert decide to partner, but spend no money until they are legally protective. After the bank calls Katie about writing bad checks, she takes a gold egg to the bank and tries to deposit it. However, they redirect her to a refinery. While Albert was initially upset, Fred tells them that they can't get the license to sell gold, so they decide to have Katie continue to sell eggs to refineries all over the state because no one would suspect or question or believe her claims about the duck. However, one refinery does become suspicious and calls the U.S. Treasury, whom Mr. Hooper works for. The Treasury starts to investigate and begins to panic as word spreads that someone has learned how to make gold, hurting its value. Hooper sees that Mrs. Dooley used Albert's real name at a refinery and begins to investigate them personally. Albert also tells Fred that eventually the radiation will wear out and the duck will no longer lay golden eggs. Hooper sees Charlie lay a golden egg and tries to bribe Jimmy with a new bike in exchange for an egg. Katie intercepts and tells Albert that he is onto them. Hooper tells the Treasury of the duck, and further investigation showed that Albert had previously spoke to Dr. Gottlieb about golden eggs. So President Nixon himself instructs the Treasury to capture Charlie. The Treasury officials arrive to take the duck. However, Jimmy escapes with Charlie to save her. They all spread out to find the pair, and eventually Albert rescues Jimmy as he hangs on a ladder between 2 buildings. The authorities take Charlie and arrest Albert. At his trial, Albert makes Charlie lay an egg. However, the radiation has worn off, and no longer will Charlie lay golden eggs. The case is dismissed, and Charlie is released back to Jimmy. The best thing about the movie is the animated duck in the beginning.
Yes, I love when Disney really took their time with some opening titles and they did them up right with the song. And this was animated by Ward Kimball, so love to see it. I have to imagine, though, that he had like a free afternoon or something and somebody just knocked on his office and was like, hey, can you bang this out? Just a quick little animation of a duck.
Yeah, I can't imagine that it took all that long. But to the film's credit, I think, for the most part, in the first 5 minutes of this movie, they do a good job introducing us to all of these characters and showing us their financial struggles. You have little Jimmy wants a puppy. His father will not allow him to have the puppy because they can't afford the $50 to adopt, plus the vet fees, the feeding, etc., and so forth, because they're behind on the bills. He was set up to be a successful scientist, to be financially stable. It's unfortunately not working out for them, and they're trying to balance the budget, and Katie, she tries in her own ways to balance the budget. To her, making homemade applesauce is a way of helping, but she still likes to go to her dress shop. So you can see that there's a tug of war going on between all 3 of them, really. That's about as good as the character development gets.
I'm going to disagree with everything you said. It's so heavy-handed. It is just so heavy-handed with the bills piling up. And then they do the flashback to the graduation where he's supposed to be, the most promising alumni, or however it is that they phrased it. It's just entirely heavy-handed. The only thing that saves it for me is how innocent Jimmy is. When he's like, I'll share my food with it. I thought that was super cute.
Well, let me just say that since you know me as well as you do, that it is very difficult for me to use the appropriate language that I want to make sure your Disney audience uses. So I'm going to do the best that I can. There might be quite a few beeps in this, but holy that was the worst thing I've ever seen in my life. I think you summed up the entire movie in your little report on it, and there's no need to go any further. I did not think even, what was this, 1971?
71, yeah.
71.
That Disney would even then put out something as horrendous as this. I mean, what a pile of crap. It was awful. I'm sorry.
So
it was terrible.
There were a string of movies like this. This was about 5 years after Disney had passed, and his son-in-law had taken over production of some of the movies. And I am thoroughly convinced after watching this that there was just a stack of scripts on Walt's desk that he left there that were in development, and they just took them as they were before they were finished and said, okay, green light, let's put some things into production. Because that's what it feels like. There's just so much disconnect with this. I mean, I will say one of the things that I think it does really well is it's self-aware in that it keeps calling out Aesop's fable. And I like that they did that because, you know, once the duck does come into the picture, it's, you know, it does seem so far-fetched. So I like that they're, you know, it's just not like, oh, great, our problems are solved. Like, they really do try and test it out. I want to circle back, though, to something that you said in the setup here with Katie, that she likes to buy her dresses and that's part of why the bills are piling up here. This is where, you know, and I really don't want to sound like I'm getting up on a soapbox for this review, but like the way that Katie is treated and clearly how women were being viewed in this film was one of the worst things about it for me. It was totally back to the times of, and like, this is, to Sasha's point, this was the 70s. The attitude towards Katie is like it's 1950, and not that it was okay then, but like, you know, Albert's view is totally like your place is in the kitchen, and she is in the kitchen trying to solve the problem, but it's, oh, no, you can't buy any more dresses, but I'm going to keep buying my lunches.
Well, I think that was more that was missed comedy. I think that was supposed to be a joke on she doesn't know how to cook. And we obviously see that with the fan bit. The fan keeps blowing the pages over, and that's why she puts things like mustard and garlic in the homemade applesauce. My big problem with it here is that we've seen, and we'll talk about cast in a little while, but we've seen Sandy Duncan before. And we saw Sandy Duncan in The Cat from Outer Space, which when you hear the title, The Cat from Outer Space, you should sit here and think, oh my God, it's one of the worst films. No, The Cat from Outer Space, despite its title, was one of my favorite films that we stumbled upon in over 5 years, or just about 5 years of doing this show. We've stumbled across a few, like The Computer Wore Tennis Shoes was another good one. The sequel's not so much. Now, see, I liked it. I know you didn't care for it, but we found a few good ones. And what they did to hit the rewind button on Sandy Duncan, like, I don't like to use the term, but they just kind of made her dumb in the movie. Like, and that is going to be a through point, and that'll be a theme as we talk through more of it here. But, you know, to your point and to Sasha's point, like 1971, I mean, we're talking 5, 6 years prior, 7 years prior, you know, you look at Mary Poppins and the suffragettes and votes for women. You know what I'm saying? Like, a more proper depiction of a period piece. Here, not only do they dial her back 20 years, but they dial her back 20 years and then I think even like rewind her a little bit further than that. It's like early 50s recovering from the late 40s is what they do with her here.
I agree. I mean, like the fan blowing around the recipe is a really clever sight gag. I actually thought that was funny, but they just don't do her any favors in this scene. Well, actually, no, they do one, because they give her the line, "What is a wife for?" And while that is not the best takeaway from the movie, it's better that it came out of her mouth as opposed to Albert's. That would have made things 10 times worse.
I personally think she was the best character in the movie, to be honest with you. I thought she was adorable, and I really appreciated that she was trying to, take care of the family. She was bubbly and cute, and I kind of liked her in the dresses.
Well, I mean, this is the thing, right? It's like ultimately the way they developed her character did her no favors, but at the end of the day, she is very innocent, and she is just trying, to your point, she's trying to do what she can to contribute to the family and make things better. And she's very aware of Jimmy. The whole film, like, for somebody that they really do water her down in terms of, you know, an overall personality, she's very in tune with Jimmy, and she's very in tune with, hey, Albert, your relationship with him is floundering. And in fact, I think what they tried to do early on, I almost feel like this movie went through a weird rewrite somewhere.
No.
Because, well, no, just listen to me.
I don't think anybody looked at the script. I think they just put it out there.
I think that early on, they were trying to develop a story where Albert and Jimmy, because she calls out the generation gap.
Yes.
And I think that I think that's originally what they were trying to do. And then later on in the movie, you see that he's becoming even further detached from Jimmy because he's starting to become greedy with Charlie. I think that was supposed to be the through point, was a father and son generational gap. And I think somewhere in there, they rewrote her to just water her down, and that whole thing went out the window. Because at times, it feels like we're watching two different characters with Katie.
I'm just going to say that what a formula that they came up with back then. I don't know. Just stick to friggin' princesses, man. That was terrible. It was bad. It was the U.S. Treasury. I mean, honestly, oh my God. The U.S. Treasury, like, coming after them like that? What the hell was that about? They all piled in the friggin' Cadillac and were chasing them. I mean, does the U.S. Treasury chase after you like that? I don't know. Maybe. I think they just slap a warrant on the friggin' door and, you know, come in. It was, blech.
Yeah, the U.S.
Although I do have a healthy fear of the U.S. Treasury, that's for sure.
They were trying to throw their weight around like they were the FBI.
But I did like the line, because we do get introduced to Mr. Hooper.
Yes.
Who's played by Joe Flynn. And we're going to talk about kind of where I feel like some of these movies are sort of trying to live in the same multiverse or universe, so to speak. So you've got Mr. Hooper, works for the Treasury. There is a very good line, though, about when Jimmy asks again if he can have $50 for the puppy, and Albert goes, "We don't have any money. The Treasury has all of our money." And he kind of says it with Hooper listening in. I thought that was a very tongue-in-cheek, a very funny, highbrow line.
As much as it's on the nose that you have him as the neighbor, most of the comedy came from having them right next door to each other. I actually think that ended up working out. So being that you had them next door to each other, you know, I think that was pretty strategic because of this pool scene. And you have to do something, obviously, to engage the kids that are watching. So, of course, what's funny, you're going to try and get all of these adults in the pool. Honestly, this scene is so hard for me to watch. First of all, it's just chaos for chaos's sake. You've got Hooper saying, "Get the duck out of the pool, get out of my yard, get your hands off my skimmer," in succession. So which thing exactly do you want Albert to do first? Do you want the duck out of the pool, or do you not want him to help you and get out of your yard? I just don't respond well to things like that to begin with. But there were other ways of accomplishing this chaos, of getting everyone in the water without putting so much stress on the animals. That, I think, to me is the worst part, because they're hitting the duck with the skimmer. At one point, when the dog goes in the pool, Hooper's like leaning on the dog and he goes under. And I mean, granted, things have come a lot farther for animal actors nowadays, but you can see that these animals are getting pretty stressed out. And for me, it's just a hard watch.
I think that this entire pool scene is just a waste of Joe Flynn. Joe Flynn is legitimately funny. We saw him even in the really bad parts of the sequels to the Computer Wore Tennis Shoes. Joe Flynn was always very, very funny. And I think that they wasted his talent here. I think they wasted the comedy here. And even he has some horribly written lines. I don't think it was in this. I can't remember if it was this scene or not, because they all become kind of conflated at one point. But he comes home, like, he's sitting in the backyard, and she gives him a cocktail, and she's like, here, take your mind off that nasty treasury. And he's like, oh, thank you, honey. You're a good person. Like, I mean, you should think you married her. Like, it's only dawning on you now that she's a good person. But, like, the whole thing just sort of becomes a mess and a waste. Sosh, what did you think about this scene with this pool, with all of them jumping in and getting thrown in the most convenient ways possible?
Well, I've had 3 golden retrievers in my life, and I did not appreciate the way that they made the golden like this evil animal. I don't think there was one scene in the movie that was good, to be honest with you. So, I mean, I could pretty much sum it up for you right there, but it was just bizarre. I don't know. It was bizarre.
No, but that is a really good point, actually, because I feel like there are so many pieces that factor into the duck laying the golden eggs that really don't make sense, because in the beginning they put so much emphasis on that applesauce. You just think that feeding the duck the applesauce is going to be enough to do it, and it's also, you know, more comedy and taking a knock at Katie's cooking. The radiology I wasn't expecting at all, but now that's also compounded with, you add in the dog barking to trigger the eggs. And again, stressing the animal. You're barking at the duck, and that's what makes her, you know, just shoot an egg out. I will say the prop eggs are pretty impressive, though, because obviously there's no way to get a golden nugget into an egg and put it back together, yolk and all. So the way that the shells collapse, I thought was pretty convincing. I'll give it that much. That's probably the nicest thing I have to say about this movie.
Can I ask you this question here? I mean, so whoever was writing this movie was like, let's go ahead and have 3 triggers in order for this miraculous golden egg to appear. 1, horrendous applesauce that only happened because the fan blew the recipe page, and one other ingredient that was different, right? What was it? I don't know. Human or some weird. Then the thing had radiation. And then the dog had a bark. So all 3 of those things had to happen.
Right.
That's correct, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, couldn't it just be radiation? Call it a day?
Exactly.
I mean, what was the point of the dog barking? I don't get it. What? Why?
No, you're right. Well, you know what it is? The point was because they wanted the adults. This, at the end of the day, they were trying to make kids laugh by forcing adults to get on their hands and knees and bark like dogs. And it was like, I understand it's a kid's movie, but this is one of those instances where, like, you shouldn't write down to kids. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
Like, kids are smart enough to find funny things funny. I mean, yeah, every now there's a reason why SpongeBob exists, right? Kids like stupid comedy. Like, of course they do. There's a reason why Dumb and Dumber exists. People like us like to have a few and sit back and watch it. And, you know, there's nothing wrong with lowbrow, but I think that this is an example of just writing stupidity because you're writing down to children.
I agree. They do manage to bring that back around, though, because they use the barking to sort of dispel when people are onto them about the duck. If it's the wrong pitch, it won't lay the egg. So if you're not doing, you know, like, depending on who they're in front of, if they're trying to prove it or if they're trying to conceal the secret, they're using that to their advantage. But you didn't need, to Sasha's point, this ridiculous trifecta. I think the applesauce would have been enough. I do want to ask you, though, Sosh, because this is the reason that we had you on for this episode. We're at the point where, you know, obviously there's like 5 golden eggs out there now. And Sean's question was, what would you do with the $1 million duck? Because you are, you know, a brilliant businessman. We look up to you so much and all that you've accomplished. So what would you do if you had this duck? Because I can imagine you wouldn't care what the trifecta was. You'd be on your hands and knees barking if it was going to give you gold.
Well, thank you for that. I mean, but they only made $4,500 anyway. So the first thing I would do is hire a better accountant to keep the treasury off my ass, to be honest with you. But I don't know, man. I mean, I'm a little nervous now because I want to, like, make sure that if like we screw up our recipes over here, if my customers are going to be laying eggs at the dinner table, you know.
Well, you'd get a cut of them, no?
God forbid we put red onions in the pico as opposed to white. But it was all over the place.
Well, that was the thing. Like, when we came across it, I'm like, Sasha's perspective, because I'm like, Sasha's going to go to a different place. He's going to be like, okay, well, wait a minute. What can we do with this duck? How do we make this duck more valuable? But to your point, it seemed like he didn't lay the eggs for very long. He was the $1 million duck that laid, not even $50,000 worth of golden eggs. So he's not even the $1 million duck.
That's what I mean. I mean, like, they made it seem like all their problems were solved. I'm like, I got to be honest with you. It's going to cost more to maintain the damn duck. You got to feed the stupid thing. You got to keep it friggin' warm. You got to take care of it. Plus, ducks, they everywhere all the time. You have any idea? And that's going to be in your carpet. So now she's got to be cleaning the carpet even more. And now they're going to be like, all she does is cook and clean. And wasn't enough money for the aggravation for me, to be honest with you.
No, and it's true. The duck is going to end up being more expensive than if he would have just bought Jimmy a dog in the first place.
Yes, and the car was what? The car was $7,500 for the car.
Yeah, it was.
They already freaking bought more than they made.
I mean,
They're already in debt. The duck did nothing except bring them more headaches.
I agree. I really thought the setup and the comedy was going to come from this duck was laying too many eggs for them to keep up with, and they were going to have to hide them. And to me, that's where the neighbor comes in. You're right next door. You have to keep it out of his sightline or stop it from like wandering into the neighbor's house the way it wandered into the radiation room. And stop it from laying an egg in his house. Like, I really thought that that's where the comedy would have come from. And I think that would have been a funnier movie, not for anything.
You're not going to change the value of gold off of $4,500 worth of eggs to the point that the 5 U.S. Treasury officers have to chase. Honestly, they created more damage and liability on the friggin' chase. To be honest with you.
No, and you're right. And then you've got the world leaders coming in afraid about what this is going to do for the global economy.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, if Nixon was the president, I think they have a lot more to worry about at that time.
Yeah.
To that point, though, I think what they do successfully with these refineries, I mean, I'm not even sure how they made Katie so dumb that even though the bank tells her what to do, she was able to figure out going to the refineries and just snatching up the checks. I like that she does take a little bit of ownership of it, of I'm going to need a new dress to, go out and do this kind of business. And then she doesn't even wait for answers. She's just literally ripping checks out of people's hands. I think that there was a little bit of a redemption arc for her there, but they do address that they need to spread it around. They can't be going to the same one. She can't be seen, too frequently. Otherwise, people are going to be onto her. And then they negate all of that because, they basically say if one of the men tried to do this, they're going, nobody's going to believe this story, that it's actually from a duck. But when Katie lies about it because she's a dumb woman, everybody just laughs it off. Yeah, and they don't question her.
That's what Fred says. He's like, coming from her, they'll never believe it. Yeah, it was so cringy.
Yeah,
it was really just a really cringy line. And the fact that she's so, like, she doesn't even defend herself. She's just like, yeah.
I'll get a new dress and I'll do it.
Exactly. They really didn't do her any favors at all. I mean, at one point, when she gives the duck away, Fred takes her and just like shaking her violently. And
okay, that was bad.
That was
awful.
And the other thing that makes no sense is she's like, well, I keep my addresses with my recipes in the cookie jar. But the other thing is, she literally just gave the duck away and has no recollection to where she was minutes prior.
Yeah.
Like, it's mind-bogglingly bad that this is what they did, that this is how they wrote poor Katie.
One of the things that I think they do sort of redeem themselves on is giving, because there is some science behind this. Albert realizes that the radiation is going to have a half-life. So, we don't know because there's so many contributing factors like we were talking about. If it's the applesauce, if it's the dog barking, if it's the radiation, he does realize that at some point this is going to wear off. So I like that we sort of have an end game in sight and that there is more of a conflict other than the Treasury chasing them down.
I wish it would have wore off an hour and 20 minutes earlier, to be honest with you. But that's just me.
I think that they tried to link it back to the science. They tried to tie it back to things making sense for Albert and for Fred, but it doesn't seem like they ever really had a plan. They never had a strategy. And to the point you made earlier, like there could have been true comedy in now the duck is overproducing. Like Breaking Bad is not an inherently funny show, but Breaking Bad has funny moments in the show when Heisenberg is too successful, when they're making too much crystal. Like when it becomes too much for them to handle, there are moments where it becomes funny. Money
laundering is funny.
Like it's unintentionally hysterical. And they could have done something like this here, and they just don't. Instead, they make Katie insufferable. And you know what? They kind of make Jimmy insufferable, too. By the midway point of the movie, I think that everything that made Jimmy so cute and lovable in the first 5 minutes, he just becomes, like, bratty, and he just stamps his feet and walks away anytime he doesn't get his way. And I think that there was a missed opportunity there for them to write the conflict between father and son, because Jimmy's just like, Charlie, I'm never going to find that duck, and then walks away, and then the duck follows, and, oh, look, I found Charlie. Like, there's something missing with this character, and I feel like either things were rewritten or things got cut out, but we're missing in the middle of the movie what's supposed to make you love this character.
You know who I thought was the worst character of all? Oh my God. Who were the two kids, the brothers that were speeding around on the little friggin' race car?
The worst.
The blonde-haired kid. Oh my God. First off, that haircut just infuriates me. I wanted to friggin' hit that kid in the face with an iron. I'm sorry. I know this is a Disney podcast. Oh my God. Every time that kid said a line, I wanted to friggin' kill myself. It was awful.
Well, and I'm glad that you bring this up, Sosh, actually, because the thing that struck me about him in particular, not so much the other brother, but him in particular, is, again, it seems like they didn't know what era they were writing in. It was 1971, but they were writing him as if he was some beatnik that was getting ready to go to Woodstock. He seemed like he was 5 to 8 years out of place.
Yeah.
Horrible.
A little bit early, but also a little bit late, because they also seem like greasers. But as soon as I saw that, oh God, I'm so glad that you brought this up, because I almost forgot about this, Sosh. As soon as I saw that go-kart and the running gag with them, just shooting out in the middle of the street, I went, oh God, there's going to be another car chase, which was, what you brought up before is like, all of these films taking place in the same universe? And I think that we know it's all on the same Disney lot. This is the Disney back lot. You can see very clearly the absent-minded professor's house, or the frat house in Computer Wore Tennis Shoes and all of those movies. But the other common thing is that there's always some sort of a car chase. And I'm like, they're going to do it again. And this was, I think, by far the most unrealistic one that we've gotten. To circle back to your point about Jimmy, I think they forgot about him, honestly. I think it was, you needed him as a plot device to push forward the idea of he wants a dog, and instead he's getting a duck, albeit just because they don't want to see the duck get killed, they bring him home. But he really, other than cuddling with the duck and trying to care for him, Jimmy hasn't really done anything until he runs away at this point, which Albert does not even care about. And then, so it was like, oh yeah, we forgot about Jimmy. And oh yeah, we forgot about these two neighbors. Let's get them back in here somehow. And they put them all in the car, and then we're chasing them through, the back roads of Burbank. It just, I mean, it looks okay. I will say most of the editing is pretty good because you've got Albert up on the cherry picker, and most of the wide shots, they did a pretty good job of matching those close-ups of when, he's hitting into trees and stuff. I feel like that's where they spent most of their time, because it looked pretty good. And then everything comes to a halt when you've got Jimmy in trouble dangling from this ladder between two buildings. I thought that looked pretty good too when it falls and it gets caught on that lower level. And then Albert saves him. Okay. You know that that's where it's going, but Albert has really done nothing to repair the relationship at this point, and nothing to, it just doesn't make sense that Jimmy's on the run from his own father. I mean, it does in the sense of he's trying to save the duck, but like, Albert needed to do a little bit more here other than just save his life and then everything is forgiven. There needed to be some kind of conversation, or, they didn't even follow up with Albert says in the beginning when he wants the puppy and he can't get it for him. He's like, are we still pals? They don't even call back to that and resolve that issue.
No, there are so many things that have happened, because honestly, like, at this point, we're kind of like fast forwarding through most of the movie, because after a while, the second half of this movie all feels like the same scene over and over again. There's not any one thing that I look at and go, oh, this pivotal moment. Nothing in the second half of this is pivotal. They rescue the duck, and every day they sit there with the windows open. The duck can come and go freely as it wants to. Like, and they're trying to protect the duck. Like, nothing here makes sense. And then you've got the Treasury chasing them, and Hooper. The only thing that they did that was kind of funny was when Hooper starts to privately investigate the family. His wife always stumbles upon him with binoculars, and it's always when Katie's by herself. And she always makes the jokes of a man of your age, and he's like, just get away. Like, there was legitimate comedy in there, wrong place at the wrong time, that I think was funny. It's just a shame that when they got the comedy right, which wasn't often, it was very funny, and they just were so inconsistent. And in the last 40 minutes or so, there's nothing that truthfully happens that you care about. Like, with Jimmy dangling between the ladder, like, your heart should break for that kid. You don't care what happens, and that's a problem.
Can I be honest with you?
Please.
I actually fast forwarded about 12 minutes as we were like in the last half an hour. I'm like, I got to speed through this because, like you said, I felt like it's not like I'm going to miss anything else for my book report today. You know what I mean? I feel like I nailed it all down. So I wasn't going to tell you that, but I couldn't. I had to shave like 12 minutes off of this movie.
Well,
honestly, I think that's the runtime of the car chase. It dragged.
No, and frankly, like, but I think if there's any indictment of any movie, like, I'm glad that you told us. Like, I think that this is sort of the overall, right? The fact that you could fast forward through and skip an entire chunk of what is supposed to be like an important part of the movie and miss nothing, that tells you everything you need to know about the movie.
Yeah.
Yep.
And then,
that's it.
Wrapping up here in our final scene in the courtroom, to me, the judge might be the most unrealistic Disney character because he rewards enterprise. I can't believe that was the let them keep the duck, sure. We're not going to penalize them for paying some bills. I mean, I will say that too. The lawyer's the only one who really starts spending money and buying new suits and buying the car. All Katie's trying to do is catch up on some bills here. So I like that even though, the theme is what happens when you get greedy, and we see how, that's really the downfall of Albert's character and his relationship to his son. I just thought it was really interesting that, they just let them go. There's not even a slap on the wrist. And there's no guarantees that they're not going to do this again, because to Sasha's point, this is a $50,000 duck. Who's not to say that they're not going to feed it more applesauce and shove it through the machine so that they can get that milli?
All right.
Hot garbage.
Let's talk about our cast here for a few moments before we give our final review. Not that I think we're spoiling anything here. Dean Jones plays Albert Dooley, and okay, so I liked him in the very beginning. I liked the seeds that they were planting with him being the responsible one and sweating everything out and being kind of the working class dad and having to balance trying to satisfy his child with also trying to be responsible. I like where they started planting that. I kind of do like where, his eyes became very wide once Fred started spending money and the greed sort of overtook him. Like, I think that there were things that they kind of wove in well here. I like where they all end up at the end, but they just didn't do this character any service. He becomes dislikable as a father because you didn't do enough to really write on the relationship between him and Jimmy. He becomes even worse as a husband with how he treats Katie. It just for a character that I think in the first 5 minutes of screen time is extraordinarily well established, I think that they completely fall off the rails.
I would agree.
Yeah, same. He's a hypocrite. He's sexist, and he is impossible to root for throughout this entire film, which is one of the biggest problems with it, because he's our lead. We're supposed to be championing him to learn his lesson and put his family first. And instead, I'm just happy to see him get his comeuppance.
Sandy Duncan plays Katie. We said it before. We've seen Sandy Duncan in other Disney films where she shines. The fact that the fan bit is very funny. She thinks she's reading the same recipe. She doesn't question it. Fine. The fact that she does things like takes a piece of gold to the bank and goes, "That's worth $900. I'd like to deposit this," and she just thinks that she can that's acceptable. The fact that when in the car chase scene, when Albert is on the ladder on the telephone repair truck and they're coming to the overpass and she means to say, "You're going to decapitate him," and she goes, "You're going to decaptivate him." The fact that her mouth is agape all of the time, by the way, which she's probably the worst written character that we have ever reviewed on this show. I think she's worse than Sharpay in High School Musical, and Ryan. I think she's worse than both of them. They're cringy. They're uncomfortable. This is worse because this is uncomfortable to a different level. She's the worst written character that we have ever reviewed on this show.
I think she was adorable, to be honest with you.
I'm going to agree with both of you. I think she was terribly written. I think that there is a little redemption in that she is trying to keep the family strong. She is the only one looking out for Jimmy, and she is trying to solve the problem between the father and son relationship. And she's also, from the jump, she is trying to solve their financial problems. But I'm also going to agree with Sosh. I thought, once you take the mouth agape out of it, she was super cute. I love her wardrobe in this. I love the hairstyle. I just wish that they would have done more to write her as a more endearing character, because then, to your point, I don't think she would have been one of the worst. I think she would have been actually one of the better characters, especially to come out of this era.
Yeah. Tony Roberts plays Fred, and what's interesting about this character is he has moments where he makes a lot of sense, where he's telling them, we can't spend any money because we don't want to expose ourselves here. We've got to be smart about it. And of course, the greed overtakes him. And as soon as he buys his new suit, now he's like, "Oh, baby, honey." Like now it's like the 1970s, but you're writing him like he's in the Rat Pack in the 50s. I don't think they knew what age they were writing for or what year that they were in. I feel like there's conflict that was lost. I think the moment he started spending money, I think that there should have been conflict between him and Albert, and I think that you could have written that in, and it would have made a lot more sense. You would have upped the ante a little bit, in regards to, hey, we gotta get out of this with him because he's the one that's going to get us in trouble because he's going to take it one step too far.
Especially because all Albert wanted to do from the beginning was pay his bills. He got greedy, but if it would have given us something to root for with Albert if you did establish that conflict, because if he just wanted to get the bills caught up and now Fred is, thinking too big, I think that would have been a lot more effective. But yeah, Fred couldn't stand him. He is my least favorite character in this movie. And I wish they would have played him for comedy instead. Like if they had given him, to your point, because they do the, baby, I wish they had given him like the Groucho cigar.
Yeah.
And then I think he would have been hilarious.
He's a very good actor. He's, didn't he do the movie with George Burns in the 80s, 18 again or something like that?
And I know he was in Annie Hall.
A lot of Woody Allen movies, I think.
Yeah, 6 of them he did. Talented actor.
He was the worst character, I think.
A waste of talent. I mean, I think that's a consistent.
Yeah.
Joe Flynn plays Mr. Hooper. We talked about him through most of the February last year. Did a lot of Disney movies. Was very funny in his Disney movies. There are moments where I would say that Joe Flynn, I think that you could almost put him on par with an Ed Wynn with, how funny he was. Not quite as iconic, but when he nailed it, I think that he was just as important for Disney in a certain time period. And I think that to have him in here and to waste his talent and to waste his comedic timing is an indictment on how this film was written and directed.
They always make him play these like Poindexter characters. And you're right, it is a waste because when he's funny, he's really funny. Here they have him, pouring iced tea all over himself.
Over and over again.
Yeah, they could have done a lot more with him.
We have Lee Montgomery as Jimmy. Like I said, I think that in the very beginning, he's an endearing little kid. And by the end, get away from me, Dad. Dad, save me. I have problems rooting for him by the end of the movie.
I think the setup in the beginning is what saves him for me, just because he is so innocent. All he wants is a puppy. And I think what I like about it is it doesn't feel like he settled for the duck, even though he named the duck the same thing that he was going to name the dog.
He's got to learn a few new names.
He's an animal lover. He's going to protect this duck no matter what. And even though the car chase is extremely far-fetched, I think it keeps it consistent with what makes him a good character. And, he's just looking out for the little guy. So I kind of like that about him. But I do think, I hate to say it, that he probably could have been played by any kid.
He was awful. I don't know, man. I'm not a movie analysis like you guys are, but every component of this movie was just wrong. It was just terrible. Really. Like you said, I think the biggest thing for me is I thought this movie was actually supposed to take place in the 50s until I realized Nixon was in there and they were driving like the buggy, because it made no sense. Like even from like their clothing to the way that they were acting, there was just, I don't think they knew what they did. You know what I think this was? I think this was a script that they friggin' put out for like a friend of somebody. Like, all right, we got to give, Joey a shot at his movie making. Walt, now's the time to do it. Because that was crap. There was no reason for this movie to ever even be made. I'm sorry.
No, that's a
My
that's a
opinion.
good take on it, especially thinking about the time period after Walt's death and the son-in-law is in office now. You actually make a really good point there.
Yeah, but it's he does. I think the point is spectacular, and I think that it's spot on, and I think that that's a great way to finish off our say here. I mean, Sosh, I think your final take is one that we're both going to echo. I mean, is it the worst film we've ever reviewed for Monoreel Radio? I think it probably is. I didn't think anything would ever be as bad as High School Musical 2. This is worse. This is worse because not only is it a poorly written film, there are moments of this movie that are uncomfortable to watch. There are moments of High School Musical, it's specifically Ryan and Sharpay because they're siblings that almost have like a bizarre...
There's a vibe.
Yeah. But that's in fleeting moments. This entire movie is borderline uncomfortable to watch. Whether it's the way they treat Katie, whether it's the way they treated the animals, the whole thing is just an absolute train wreck. And I think that Sosh is 100% right. I think that when Walt Disney died and Ron Miller got in, you kind of saw the zany movies, right? And they were, but there were two sides of the spectrum. There's very little middle ground. You have The Count from Outer Space, you have The Computer Wore Tennis Shoes, and then you have this and what is The World's Strongest Man or The Strongest Man in the World, right? There's no in-betweeners. They're one side or they're the other side. And I'm confident in saying this is worse than the sequels to Computer. It's worse than HSM2. It's worse than the Black Cauldron. I could find redeeming qualities in some of those movies. I find nothing redeeming about $1 Million Duck.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, there were moments that I found a little bit redeeming for some of the characters, but I think for me, where I will say that this is the worst one that we've ever reviewed for the show, is that normally when there's a bad movie, you and I can see, we'll sit here and say, okay, I can see what they were trying to do here. They just didn't do it. I can't think of one instance of, okay, I see what the thought process was here, especially, to Sasha's point with there's the, the 3 steps that we have to get for these golden eggs, and, all of it was just completely unmotivated, completely disjointed. And this is speculative, but supposedly this is one of 3 films that Gene Siskel ever walked out on in the movie. So Sosh, you are in good company fast forwarding there.
Wow. I mean, what a privilege to have my first monorail experience being a part of the worst movie you've ever seen. So I certainly feel like I need an exorcism after watching that. In fact, when my oldest daughter loves to, when she was a little girl, she would write books, and she would sit there for days, writing these stories. And it was cute because a lot of it just didn't make sense and it was all over the place, but it was cute. I got to be honest with you. I feel like I was watching one of the friggin' books that my daughter, when she was 6, was writing for days. Because it was just, it was put out to be like a cute Disney movie, but it just was all over the place. It made no sense. Yeah, I got to be honest with you. Not for me.
I feel like this is so on brand, though, for our friendship. But thank you for suffering through it. Thank you for being here with us. Please let our listeners know where we can find you, where they can find all things behind the Blowhole.
Well, first off, I'm a married man with 3 kids, and I have 3 businesses. So there is absolutely nothing in life that could absolutely rattle me or feel that it's torturous. So I actually kind of found this quite quite a breath of fresh air to stop doing what I do normally, and I'd be happy to review crappy movies with you anytime. So thank you for inviting me.
We're going to hold you to
And
that.
for anybody out there that, yes, no, please, anybody wants to hear some raw and uncensored behind the scenes of what it takes to run a restaurant, tune into Behind the Blowhole. Or you can get us at thewhalestailnorthport.com and check it out. And if anybody is ever up here in Northport from Florida, or the Northport people, come say hi. And, that's what we do. We make tacos. We don't care cancer. It's fun.
The best tacos. He's being
I appreciate it. I
humble.
have fun. Cool.
Good.
Well, we were happy to have you
bless
here. And we are interested in knowing what you have to say about $1 Million Duck. Have you seen it? What is your review? You can join the conversation on social media at Monoreel Radio on all major platforms, or send us an email, monoreelradio@gmail.com. News of the week is coming up, but first a quick break.
News of the Week is proudly sponsored by KMV Travel. KMV Travel is a boutique travel agency that helps families plan personalized vacations and create unforgettable memories in the happiest place on earth. If you've dreamed of visiting Waltz Park or racing with Lightning McQueen in Cars Land, a KMV Travel specialist will work with you to customize the perfect getaway for you and your family. Your KMV Travel advisor will ensure you know the ins and outs of the My Disneyland app, assist with dining reservations, and of course, share their favorite hacks so you can get the most out of your vacation. Visit kmvtravel.com to soar over to California now.
If you're thinking of booking a trip to a Disney destination, you have to contact Jackie Zalezi. My husband and I recently celebrated our 10-year wedding anniversary and wanted to go on a trip, just the two of us. Jackie suggested Disneyland, knowing we'd never been and I had been dreaming of going. I am so thankful for her suggestion, as it was the most magical way to celebrate. Jackie got us a fantastic deal, but still constantly checked for discounts to make sure we are guaranteed the lowest price. Having recently visited Disneyland, she was a great source for helpful information and had suggestions for everything, including meals, Max Pass, even places to visit in Los Angeles on our non-park day. Upon arrival at our hotel, we experienced the easiest check-in because Jackie had taken care of everything. Throughout our trip, Jackie was in constant contact, making sure we had everything we needed and answering any questions we had. Our vacation was perfect.
Disney Live Action and 20th Century Studios have a new president. Sean Bailey, the longtime president of film production, is going to be stepping down. David Greenbaum is going to be stepping in. And it's very interesting that they selected him because he most recently co-head Searchlight Pictures. And Searchlight, we've talked a lot in the last few weeks as award season is coming and nominations are coming. Where are you seeing a lot of things coming from? Not quote unquote Disney proper. It's Hulu. It's Searchlight. So I am not surprised to hear this. I'm very interested to see what this means for this new title of Disney Live Action, so to speak. Obviously, the box office numbers have not been where they want them to be. It's going to be interesting to see where the pivot is in terms of Disney Live Action and what the response is going to be with new films moving forward.
Based on box office numbers, making a change was not a surprise, but I actually really appreciate that they rewarded, a proven success record, especially after something like the acquisition of Poor Things. That has been sweeping award season. So I hope I'm not reading too much into it by thinking that, they are going to start shifting and looking at original concept. So the timing is not a surprise, but makes me hopeful. Got a lot of parks news here.
Yeah.
Putting a lot of work into Tokyo Disney Sea, which we knew was coming, but now we've started to get some concept art released for Rapunzel's Forest. So it looks like there's going to be a water attraction, which you hope that they do, right? I mean, everybody wants to see the floating lanterns gleam. That would have missed the mark if they didn't do something like that. But it looks really nice. We got some more concept art for Frozen Kingdom and for Peter Pan's Neverland, which I am really intrigued by because, you and I had one of the things we couldn't stand most about Peter Pan and Wendy was that they missed Neverland entirely, and they didn't capture, you know, the look of what you imagine it to be, or all of the different facets of each land.
Yeah.
And it looks like they do that here. And you're going to get, you know, basically what Peter Pan's flight is as a dark ride, you're going to get a whole land out of it. So that looks pretty cool. But I thought, you know, it's interesting, even though they've made all of these announcements, and these lands have been known entities for a while. Now we're starting to see the concept art come out and get people excited about it, because what else happened in Tokyo? We got Nintendo World over at the competition. And, you know, I don't think that seeing this parallel of money being invested over there, you know, is any coincidence, because now we're also starting to see it on the home front here in Florida. Obviously, we know that Epic Universe is coming to Universal Orlando in 2025. And I was surprised for a moment when I saw Disney open up their 2025 bookings from January to October. You know, that's earlier than we've ever seen it. Even, you know, on the travel agent end of things, we didn't know this was coming. They kind of just released it, and it was like, okay, it's happening tomorrow. Get your wait list ready, because, you know, tomorrow you're going to be able to book these things. And I was like, wow, you know, we've gone from 6 months out to a year out being able to book, to now almost 2 years being able to book, which is wonderful for the consumer, because it's a $200 deposit, which is refundable up until 30 days before your travel. So even if you're not 100% sure that you want to plan a Disney trip for 2025, you can get a quote, you can put the deposit down, and then you can always decide, you know what, we're not going to do it. So it is great, but it's not completely altruistic, because once I really started to think about it, I was like, oh, they want to know if people are going to be staying on property. They want to know how successful they are going to be against the competition. And now Universal becoming more than a weekend park. They're becoming really a week-long park. So Disney's trying to get ahead of that and figure out what their numbers are.
And they're incentivizing now by offering for the first day of your trip, it's only for the first day. So also a means of hoping that people will add a day to their trip, I think. They're incentivizing by offering free admission to the water park. So that is something, like, you've never seen something like that before. And I think that they're probably thinking that they can utilize something that's underutilized by most park guests. And I think they're also using this as a means of, when Universal opened Volcano Bay, it was a bigger deal than Disney reopening their water parks that operate sort of seasonally and go through maintenance or whatever. I think they're trying to not only incentivize you to stay on property by offering you a free admission, but they're also trying to showcase, hey, they have a few parks in a water park. We've got parks in a water park. It's none of this is by accident, but I actually give them credit. I think that that's the right move. And I think it's smart for them to do what they can at this point to incentivize people to stay on their property.
I agree. I mean, I think what they're doing here by opening the door to the water parks is that, you know, if you're considering maybe a 4-day day in each park type of vacation, extend that stay, maybe make it 5 days. If your kids love the water park because you enjoyed it when you got to go for free, maybe you'll tack it on to the next trip. So I think it's a smart business move on their part, but it is only for the first day of your trip.
Yes.
That's the catch. But I actually like that from a planning perspective, or like thinking about how you and I would do vacations. If we were to look at the water park as like a half-day park, I like the idea of like flying in, change into your bathing suit, go to the water park, and if you only stay for a couple of hours, no harm, no foul, because it's free.
sit by the pool, have a cocktail, do the lazy river, and wait for your room to be ready.
Yeah, instead of flying in the morning, racing to a park, and then feeling like you're only going to get on half of the attractions that you want to. I think this is a good way to set the tone for a vacation.
Absolutely. Now those are trips in 2025. Let's talk about little staycations or getaways or vacations coming up in the near future, specifically this upcoming weekend. If you are a Disney fan, I absolutely suggest, if you haven't gotten a ticket yet or if you haven't considered going, absolutely check out the House of Mouse Expo. It's going to be at the Osceola Park Heritage Center. It's going to be this Saturday and Sunday, March 2nd and 3rd. Tickets and details are at houseofmouseexpo.com. We are going to be there set up. We have a vendor set up, but we are not selling anything. If it's on the table, it's there to be taken for free. This is just us wanting to be a part of the Disney community. Michelle and Scott run an absolute incredible event. A lot of great meet and greet opportunities. They're still announcing. Guess Barry Bostwick got announced last night.
I was just going to ask if you saw that. I, for one, am so excited. I was not familiar with his work in Phineas and Ferb because I was like, how does this happen? Because I know him from Rocky Horror Picture Show. So I am like pumped beyond all reason to meet Brad. But otherwise, yes, for Disney fans, he's done a lot of voice actor work.
I'm just very, we loved House of Mouse Expo last year. So if you are in the area, if you're coming on vacation, or maybe you got some frequent flyer points and you're looking to get away and come see some warm weather and meet some incredible Disney guests, House of Mouse Expo, absolutely the way to go. It's a great time. Get your tickets now if you haven't already gotten your tickets.
And if you're not able to make it, we are going to try, once we get the lay of the land, to do an Instagram live so you can tune in and we'll take you around to some booths and vendor setups and things like that.
Walk the floor, yeah.
Yeah, keep an eye on our social media this weekend.
Yes, but we want to know what you have to say about the Disney news. Are you excited for the expansions and the new things coming over to Tokyo Disney Sea? Are you excited that they're adding the water parks for free? Does that incentivize you to book and to come down? Let us know on all major social media platforms at Monoreel Radio, or you can email us monoreelradio@gmail.com. Thank you all so much for joining us this and every week on Monoreel Radio. Monoreel Radio will always be free, but there are many ways that you can help support the show. Please give us a rating wherever you listen to your podcasts. Join the conversation on social media at Monoreel Radio on all major platforms. Share your favorite episodes with family and friends who may enjoy them. And of course, book your next trip with Jackie. Links to everything can be found at monoreelradio.com. We all get one story. Make yours a magical one.
On behalf of Monoreel Radio, we'd like to thank you for joining us. We'll see you at the movies, the stuff dreams are made of.